We are back here on Wrestling Observer Live. This is Bryan Alvarez with our guest host today, Lance Storm. You can call in at any time. We have some open lines. The number is 1-800-878-PLAY. We were talking about TNA and their move to 2 hours this coming Thursday. They have already taped the first 2 episodes of the 2-hour show. And Lance, on your website today, stormwrestling.com, you wrote a big article. In fact, there were 2 articles. There was one article about TNA and your thoughts on it, and there was another smaller segment, just TV thoughts, in which you also happen to bury TNA. And as we've mentioned, we've said a lot of things about TNA in the past, so to look at this from a positive perspective, if you could change anything about TNA currently, what would that be?
It's hard to pick just one, but honestly, I think the first thing I would do is either replace or gag their announce team. I think Mike Tenay and Don West really kill the show. I think they hamper more than they do help.
So this is the first thing that you would do?
That's the first thing I would do, yeah. Even before I would, shoot the creative department, I think I would replace them.
Really?
I find even if there's a match in the ring that I might like watching, their nonstop chatter and they're talking about other things just ruins any enjoyment about even the good things on the show, in my opinion. They would be the first thing I would change.
Now, I also wanted to talk about something before we get any further. It was the autopsy of Bryan Adams has come back, and it was determined that he passed away of an overdose. It was an accidental overdose. He had 4 drugs in the system, including a muscle relaxer, a painkiller, and Xanax, which Chris Benoit also had in his system when he died. They were all at therapeutic levels, but the 4 of them combined killed him at age 44. And were you surprised when this came back?
Certainly not. It seems to be, the norm more than anything else, that multiple combinations of drugs seems to be what does in most of the boys that pass away early. Especially the muscle relaxers, because, they said that he wasn't breathing. I think it just goes back to, I wouldn't be surprised to find out he had an enlarged heart, and the muscle relaxants or some was probably slowed down his heart, because that's what, I'd watched a shoot interview with Chris Candido once, and he said he almost did have a heart attack once, and it was due to the fact that the muscle relaxants, I think he was on Somas at the time, slowed his heart rate down so slow, and with his enlarged heart needing to beat actually harder than everyone else's, that it, just about caused him to die there. So this certainly doesn't surprise me at all.
Now, you, of course, a former wrestler in ECW, WCW, and WWE, and WWE a couple of weeks ago sent a letter to 500, I've actually been corrected, I had written 500 former employees, and somebody pointed out that WWE wrestlers are not, in fact, employees, they're independent contractors, so 500 former independent contractors offering free rehab. And you got this letter, and were you surprised?
I was a little surprised. I had read online that they were offering the rehab service to anyone that needed it. I didn't expect to get a personalized letter in the mail from Vince. Granted, it's a form letter, obviously, that's a computer personalized, but still, it was a letter from Vince offering me rehab. And one thing I did think was nice, so they actually are encouraging you to pass the letter on to others that may not have got it if you think they might need it. You can complain all you want about the motivation behind it, but if there's one guy out there that takes him up on it, it's a good thing.
Do you think that, obviously most people would think that, well, the reason that they did this was because Congress is breathing down their neck. There are 2 ways to look at it. One way to look at it is, well, they did not publicize this until the wrestling newsletters and websites publicized it, so perhaps this was just something that they did out of the goodness of their heart. But there's also the other way to look at it, in that if you send a letter out to 500 employees, well, obviously it's going to end up in the wrestling media, and at that point it's going to be picked up elsewhere, which is exactly what happened. It ended up in Newsday and that sort of thing. But as you mentioned, it is all things considered, they are offering free rehab.
Yeah, the end result is good. They certainly didn't need to publicize it. Even when they try to keep a secret, the world hears about it. So, trying to publicize it and get good PR out of it, is really a waste of time and effort, because it's going to get out there one way or the other.
Now, do you think that this is something that some wrestlers might take, an offer that they might take? Because it just sort of seems to me that I don't think the issue with a lot of guys going to rehab is that they can't afford it.
Well, I think the only chance it really has of succeeding is if it gets into the hands of a wife or a spouse that's been, really hoping that their spouse might clean up, and this might give them a means by which to get them down that road. Like if my wife had opened this and I was a drug addict mess that she's been struggling with for years, she could call the lady that's listed in here and try to get some help and try to get me into rehab. So it's the possibility that it could work. But unfortunately, most drug addicts, don't jump up and want to go to rehab. So I don't know how many people will take advantage of it. We can just hope some will.
Now, 11 wrestlers were suspended recently as a result of purchasing drugs over the Internet. And, of course, the WWE wellness policy prohibits such a thing. But somehow none of these people ended up getting suspended until it became public that they had purchased things over the Internet. But regardless, they were suspended, and it was a 30-day suspension, and I believe tomorrow is day 27 or 28, and they are returning. The Raw Stars, Umaga, Regal, Ken Kennedy will be returning tomorrow night. The former ECW champion, John Morrison, will be returning on Tuesday. And Chavo Guerrero, Funaki, and others will be returning on Friday to SmackDown. And do you expect this to improve the television? Because WWE programming lately has been poor. And some people place the blame on these people being suspended. And others are just looking at it from the perspective of it's just not good TV regardless of who you have on the show. So what do you expect tomorrow?
I'm hoping the show will improve, although I certainly don't blame the lack of talent as the reason for the show being, damn near unwatchable lately. I think it's just been bad TV. Although I do find it interesting, I didn't know that they're actually shortcutting the 30 days by a couple to get an extra TV taping in.
They are, in fact. Give it a few days off the.
Which is, just horrendous if it's in fact shortcutting it, and which would, to be completely contradict your wellness policy. Like, well, it's sort of close, but we need to get these guys back on TV.
Let's go to Ed in San Antonio. He has some comments on WWE in general. Ed, what's going on?
Yeah, hey guys, how you guys doing? Bryan, congratulations on the promotion. I'm glad that Wrestling Observer is going to stay on. And yeah, I wanted to talk a little bit about the letters they sent out for the drug testing. Do you think, like you guys are saying that probably guys aren't going to take it up, but do you feel that this will continue, or do you think like they'll offer this for like the years to come, or is this just something that's going to happen right now while the heat's on with Congress and all the news and everything like that?
It's actually a good question. I mean, I don't picture a guy coming forward in 5 years and asking them to if the rehab offer is still valid. I think it was something that they sent out as a result of Congress putting pressure on them. And I just, I think that if nobody takes advantage of it now, like if I were a drug addict and somebody offered me rehab and because of my addictions I was not up to taking that offer, I'm not sure that down the road I would be more willing to. Perhaps I would. But I don't know. Lance, your thoughts?
I doubt it'd be an active program where the woman in charge is going to be sitting by her phone and there's an 800 number out there for them. But I would imagine if 5 years, if somebody actually reached out to them, I wouldn't be surprised if they would make the effort. But yeah, I don't think it's going to be something on the forefront in their plans are concerned after the next year.
Okay, and Lance, I have a question for you. Everyone hears stories from the internet about like incidents that happen, and I was just curious. There was like a famous incident where at one of the Hall of Fame ceremonies, I think the story was JBL tried to pick a fight with you, and I was wondering if you could actually tell us what exactly happened that night.
Oh, okay. I think calling it famous is a bit of a stretch, but it was actually at WrestleMania, the one in L.A. I had said something, I don't even know what exactly it was, in OVW that had gotten reported back to John. Whether it accurately or not, I have no idea. And we crossed paths in the trainer's room at WrestleMania, and he exchanged a few unpleasant words, but that was about it. I wouldn't say he was trying to pick a fight. He was just voicing his opinion loudly for a minute or two. Didn't amount to a whole lot.
Okay, you know, like I say, everyone, we hear stories that probably are more than there actually to it, and I just thought you'd like the chance to say that. And also, another question I have for you is, back, I don't know how to say this on radio, back when they gave you the gimmick of you having the gimmick in
a large member.
Yeah, okay, yeah, exactly. What was going through your mind when they gave you this gimmick?
Boy, there was so many things going through my mind, and I doubt very few going through theirs. I think someone just thought it would be funny and decided that, hey, I could be the human tripod and tag with Val, and everybody could have a chuckle. And the angle was done so poorly, most people don't even know that I was doing that for a while.
On that subject, there was another storyline that you were given early on in your WCW career, or your, I guess Vince Russo suggested this, that you would be Eric Bischoff's illegitimate child.
Yes, that was the first creative input Russo threw at me the day we actually met when I was negotiating my contract. I met with Russo and Bischoff, and Russo and I discussed potential creative directions, while Eric and I, discussed actual contracts, money, and details, and so forth. And he thought I had the same cocky, arrogant look on my face that Bischoff had, and figured I'd be a natural to play his illegitimate son.
Would this require dyeing your hair black or anything of that nature?
Yeah, we didn't get that far, thankfully. Eric put the kibosh on it relatively early, which was nice. I think Eric was involved in about 4 other angles on TV at the time, and I think they thought of having an illegitimate son my age didn't sit well with him.
Now, we've had a lot of people, and maybe it's just me, but I seem to have had a lot of people that have made the comment that I could watch Raw every week until the illegitimate storyline played out with Vince McMahon, and it ended up being Hornswoggle. You seem to have somewhat of the same opinion. I don't know if you've completely given up on Raw or anything like that, but you were very let down by this revelation.
Yeah, it really... It didn't kill it for me, but I have to admit I have not watched an entire episode of Raw since. There's a few other factors with timing as far as why I haven't, but I found, granted the angle was a bit of a stretch from the believability scale, but I found it interesting, and it was sort of the one thing on Raw that I'm like, okay, this could be interesting, I'm going to see where it goes. And I felt so slapped in the face with such a ridiculous comedy joke finish that I really lost interest to a large extent. And the next week I tuned in partway through the show because we get it in Canada live and then replayed, so I usually catch bits and pieces on each broadcast. And the first bit that I caught was some of the stupid skits with Hornswoggle, and I'm like, this is, there's no wrestling, there's no sport, and it's not entertaining, so I've turned it off the last couple of weeks, well before seeing more than half the show.
The interesting thing about that whole deal was word got out about Kennedy being the son, and Vince and Stephanie McMahon got very upset and laid down the law to the creative team, the usual speech about we don't want leaks, that sort of thing, and it's been very quiet the last several weeks, and I don't know this for certain, but I have this belief that when Kennedy got suspended, that sort of put a kibosh on the whole thing, because the show was in Green Bay, and the belief was he was going to be revealed as the child that day, and he ended up getting suspended and could not be there. And so my feeling is that the entire Hornswoggle thing was a way to, I guess, just deflect the heat or keep the storyline going for a month while he was out of action. And I sort of have this feeling that tomorrow he is going to return and destroy the midget and become the son again. And I really felt that way at the end of the show when the midget came out and revealed that he was the Mr. McMahon that had changed a John Cena main event match and I guess the storyline was Cena was going to have to rescind the belt, and Mr. McMahon he didn't have to and ended up being the midget. And just the idea of the show going off the air with the midget smiling and a big thumbs up, I just thought, that midget's in trouble next week.
We're going to kill that little person.
That's really what I thought. I thought the midget is going to get... In fact, somebody actually had they put it up on our website. It was a video, I can't remember what it was from, some sort of TLC match, something like that, of Kennedy giving the, whatever it is, the torture rack roll off a ladder on that same midget, and I thought, it's going to happen again.
It could be, although unfortunately for me, the Hornswoggle reveal wasn't a comedic, a bridge in the angle to continue later. It just really turned me off, the whole damn thing.
So to you, it seemed like this is over.
It's over for me. Perhaps if they can make it really intriguing when they come back, I'd be willing to, get behind that angle. I'm not saying I'm done with Raw, but it's like, as far as I'm concerned, this angle isn't one I want to see any more of. And I think even if Kennedy just comes back and gets the spot and gets the big push, part of that will offend me too, because what does that say about the suspensions and the whole purpose behind the wellness program? If it's like, well, we have to suspend you for 30 days, but we'll hold off the really big money program so you can still make your money.
I think that's I think it's kind of a given that that's how things are going to be, but
I keep foolishly hoping it's not.
Were you surprised? I shouldn't even ask this question because I already know the answer, but I'll ask it anyway. Were you surprised when you turned on Raw and saw the size of Vince McMahon and Triple H this week?
I didn't see, again, I didn't watch a whole lot this week. I saw the brief, I caught the tail end of Vince jumping off the cage where he almost fell. And it wasn't enough to tell if he was, just big because he's always been big and hasn't, lost it all yet, or whether he was still just as jacked as normal. Hunter seems to be getting, bigger and harder every week I see him, which, will never surprise me. It may disappoint me, but it never surprises me.
We have an email question here for you. Apparently, this person writes, Mike Quackenbush won the Ted Petty Invitational last night after getting a concussion in a match and then coming back to wrestle later that evening. Do you think this kind of action is courageous, foolhardy, or a little of both?
If he legitimately had a concussion, it's beyond foolhardy. It's bloody insane. I think people need to start taking head trauma a hell of a lot more serious. I think we've been, not taking it seriously enough, but in light of Chris Benoit and his brain autopsy, I think anybody that, works again immediately after a concussion is throwing their life away.
Yeah, I'll have to check on that because I don't know if he got a concussion or not. I know that the concussion played into a storyline perfectly, so it may have been a work deal, but that was last night. And I should mention also that this past Friday night at Arena Mexico, there was the 74th anniversary show of CMLL. It was a 6-way match with all of the masks and hair on the line. Liz Mark Jr. ended up being unmasked at the finish, and one of the big stories was that Mystico, who was putting his mask on the line, had suffered a head injury the night before. He was hospitalized. I think he was in the hospital all night, actually. He was in the emergency room for 2 hours. He, I guess, tried a flying head scissors, and in the middle of the move, I believe it was a Festo, slipped, and Mystico fell on his head, and hospitalized, emergency room for 2 hours, and then in the just normal hospital room. And he came back the next day and wrestled. And it's same sort of story. I think that, especially in 2007, after the Chris Benoit thing, I just think that guys need to take care of their heads better. I think that concussions are nothing to fool around with. I think this should have been known for a long time, but more so now than ever. And I don't know. I would not consider it. I mean, in some ways, I guess you could say it's courageous that you would do that, but it's far more foolhardy to me.
Yeah, I think to a large extent, I think courage and stupidity sometimes go hand in hand. But yeah, I think the business has been in denial for too long. I think we have to really start taking care of ourselves better. I think being brave and toughing it out and, working no matter what, I think that needs to be reevaluated, especially when it comes to head trauma, because there are going to be, a lot of guys with some serious brain issues later on in life. It's just not worth it. I think fans are going to have to get used to the occasional, I'm sorry Mystico cannot wrestle tonight. He will be signing autographs. We're terribly sorry. He suffered a, head injury last night.
Let's go to Dean in Brooklyn, who wants to talk about Raw. Dean, are you there?
Hi, how you doing, Brian? Yeah, actually, I wanted to talk about something regarding Chris Benoit. I mean, in that article by the Sports Institute, they pointed out the fact that there's no way they can prove a causal connection between the concussions and the murder-suicide. I mean, there were other factors involved. I know as a lawyer myself who has studied domestic violence that there had to be other factors in terms of maybe Nancy threatened to leave him, and that's why he snapped and killed her, because I just think that he did that because he wanted to go to heaven. I mean, there's stories that said that Benoit became religious all of a sudden, and many times when people become religious, they become delusional and they don't want to live on in this world anymore. So they figure, I want to die so I can go be with God or something, you know?
Well, yeah, I mean, there are obviously many different theories, and there's never going to be, I think, one answer to this question. I think that the head trauma was a major part of it, just because it probably added a lot to his depression. It probably added a lot to his anxiety. Obviously, he was taking Xanax and everything like that. And you know, if you really study head injuries, it's pretty clear that they mess you up in major ways. So
yeah.
I don't think that anybody can say that the head injuries are the main reason that Chris Benoit did anything, but I think that they were probably a major reason.
Yeah, true, but also you mentioned that steroids actually can lead to paranoia and depression, and this guy wrestled for 22 years, so he probably used steroids a lot, like in WCW, ECW, WWE, so that could be a factor as well.
Well, I mean, there are a lot of things that can lead to depression, and to me, I never liked the roid rage explanation, because to me, guys have been using steroids since the late 50s, and we don't hear about them killing their families. Now, this could have been a deal where he injected himself with steroids, and that afternoon he went crazy and killed Nancy. But everything else over the course of the rest of the weekend, I can't attribute that to a roid rage. I mean, you're not going to have a roid rage that was drawn out over 2 days. I mean, maybe it was something that caused the first murder, but the rest of it was a result of a number of different things.
I think there was probably a good, 6 or 8 contributing factors, and, obviously the brain trauma and mental state that went with that was one. The steroids and the antidepressants were another. And then you've got the domestic tension that he and Nancy made. I think there's a lot of factors involved for sure. We'll never pin down one ever.
My question is, do you think, like I said, I'm finishing up law school myself, and I just think that the WWE should not be held liable for, like Chris Benoit's father. I don't think it's right for him to say, I'm going to blame WWE for this, because he worked for them for 7 years. And the guy had depression. Last year they gave him 4 months off. They didn't know this guy was a threat to his family. I mean, and they didn't know that, WWE didn't force him to go out there and do that headbutt. They didn't force him to take chair shots to the head and not put his hands up. So, I think there are a lot of factors.
I think the most that you can say is that they could have done more. I don't think that you can say that they're liable or that it's their fault or anything like that, because as Chris Nowinski mentioned, he'd had many concussions and they didn't show up on any medical records. And it's the same thing WWE said, but I suspect that they knew that he had concussions. And there were also different incidents, like when they wanted to ban the German suplex, and Benoit and Angle both went to Vince McMahon and talked him out of it. I mean, there were things that WWE could have done better, but I think it's awfully hard to find them liable. So we have Dave Meltzer on the line. Dave, how's it going?
Hey, it's going good. How are you guys?
This is strange.
It is, isn't it?
I'm on the other side of the questioning here.
Yeah.
I guess the first question is, you have seen Rock's new movie.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
It's a kids' movie. If you have kids,
everybody says.
If you have young kids, they'll like the movie. It's I don't really see it as an adult's movie. It did real well, especially last night. It did real well at the box office, and I know he's thrilled. But if you're an adult, you're going to see it as pretty predictable. I mean, you can see pretty much everything coming. The slapstick is kind of the obvious slapstick you would see in a Disney movie. So that's kind of what it is. He's good at, he comes across well in it.
And this is the last movie as Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson.
Yes. He's the next movie, which is Southland Tales, which is going to come out in just a couple of weeks, and probably not with nearly the publicity. He's just going to be Dwayne Johnson, and that's his name from this point forward.
You think that's does it even make any difference? I sort of think he should keep it. You know what I mean? Why not?
I think that in his mind, The Rock is a professional wrestling name, and he wants to. It's real important to him, I think, to be seen as something other than a professional wrestler. I don't think that it's so much of, I don't think that the current situation in pro wrestling, helps you in the movies. But I think that it's just, I think he wants to be a guy who used to be a pro wrestler, as opposed to being thought of as a pro wrestler who's doing movies.
Yeah. Now, Southland Tales, I believe they re-edited it about 70 times. What's the update on that?
I don't know. I mean, I know they redid a whole bunch of scenes, and it's coming out in November, and it got destroyed at Cannes. He was in France, it was like so excited that, he was getting it screened there, and the critics just killed it worse than like any movie at that festival in decades. So they had to redo the whole thing.
Now, you saw that movie on the same weekend that you went down for UFC 76, and what were your thoughts on that show in general?
It was an awesome show live, It was upsets, incredible crowd reactions, it was newsworthy. I mean, there's been so many news stories coming out of that thing, and they still don't end. I mean, you create a situation of parity where you've got all kinds of different matches to go to, but you don't have any obvious matches to go to. So it's made for things to be really interesting. We've seen what I think we've seen is that the mega match that's going to do the giant buy rate was taken away, but now we have more matches, so maybe we have more more matches that can do a little bit above average buy rate. So whether one is better than the other, and the one that's probably better is really the one where you have the mega buy rate. The fact is that it's out of your control, and you just got to do the best you can.
Do we have any news on Brock or Fedor?
Neither have signed, and Fedor won't sign for a while. I don't think that until after the Sambo Championships in Russia. I don't even think that there's going to be even any more negotiations. And as far as Brock, it can happen at any time. The Brock situation is a real tough one because, UFC is very different from Japan in the sense in Japan they would give him similarly experienced freak show guys, like Choi Hong-man, which was supposed to be his first opponent, and if he were to sign in Japan, that would probably be his next opponent. Or they might give him some people out of professional wrestling that are, relatively inexperienced at this. But with UFC, you go right into the lion's den, and I don't know that he's ready for that. I mean, as great an athlete as he is, and as great a potential as he could have in this sport, you just can't go in there with one fight and be, fighting these guys that are complete, athletes in the sport. It's like a guy learning basketball who's, tall and agile and can do anything, but then playing against, college players and NBA players after a year in the sport, it's just too difficult to master, and there's too many things to learn. So, going there, it's UFC is the best place for notoriety. I don't know it's the best place for him this early in his career.
Lance, were you there for that incident where Brock and Angle had their little deal in the ring?
No, that was on SmackDown, I think, when I was on Raw, so I got to miss that one. This is the thing I think that everyone doesn't realize is, competing at a professional level is a completely different ball game. I think Brock learned that lesson when he tried to play football, that regardless of how much of a freaking amazing athlete he is, you really need years in the trenches to be really good at a professional sport. And I think that's what Dave was talking about with UFC. It's like to just get thrown in there with the best, he probably could use a couple more years of seasoning first.
We were talking about the TNA.
Brian, you could never, if you thought about it, like a guy, you could take the greatest natural athlete in the world and a year of boxing training and then put him in there with upper echelon boxers. He would just get destroyed.
Yeah.
And here, the one thing is the wrestlers do adapt because there's so much wrestling involved in this, but there's still all those other things, and you've got to be, this is a sport, and he's gonna have to learn the complete sport before he can be a champion. And I don't know. Hopefully, he'll have more patience than he had with football.
By the way, what do you know about Bill Duff? Have you been watching Human Weapon?
I haven't watched Human Weapon. Was he a football player, or was he?
He was a football player.
Yeah.
The reason I ask is because they did the MMA show last night, which was actually an awesome show, and he has a wrestling background and was apparently a pretty good wrestler, but he didn't understand how to do the double leg takedown or the Greco-Roman clinch into a takedown. So I was just a little confused as to what exactly his wrestling background was. But, anyway, he faced Rico Rodriguez last night, who was gigantic, and they went to a very, very slow draw.
Yeah.
But it was a good show. So the TNA debut on Thursday, 2 hours. Are you looking forward to it?
No, not really, because I was really hoping that, whenever there's a big change, you really hope for like a change in direction and a change in mentality. And TNA's got a lot of wrestling talent, but I think that the booking has always confused me, and now more than ever. And I don't think that that's changing. I don't think that they don't really believe in baby faces and heels. And to me, I think that that's sort of the cornerstone. I mean, you can have shades of gray, but I think that should be your exception. Whereas with TNA, it's kind of like your rule, you know, and plus just the whole thing of you know, the multiple man matches constantly. I just don't see that really like gets
and multi-women.
Yeah, nobody really ever gets to me. Nobody really gets elevated that way, and it's kind of a caste system, and no matter how hard the guys underneath work, they're still underneath guys, and you know, I mean, we've seen this in other promotions, and then there is a lot of similarities to this in the end of WCW, and I don't necessarily, you know, obviously that's a very bad thing.
I want to ask you both a prediction. After the .91 came out for Impact this last Thursday, Spike was asking around as far as predictions for the rating for the 2-hour show. I predicted a 1-1. Maybe I'm crazy. Lance, what are your thoughts?
I'm going 1.0. I don't know if the show doesn't improve, how many people are going to be able to stick it out for 2 hours. And I don't think anyone other than TNA fans know anything's different, so I don't think they're going to draw a huge market anywhere.
Dave?
Well, you know, they're not doing any special advertising for the show, which would be key to what I would want to do. You know, and I would obviously want to have some really big thing at the end, and they don't have any really big thing at the end. And their big hook, you know, which is they're putting in the middle of the show, is that you get to see Pac-Man wrestle, but he doesn't wrestle as usual. And obviously we've seen Pac-Man means nothing for ratings anyway. But I mean, I still think that probably, you know, I would say 1-1 if I was going to pick a number. You know, yeah.
So you're predicting no big commercial on Raw tomorrow?
No, because there's been plenty of times when they should have done that, and they never have in the past, and I just don't.
So you have no faith in them learning from their past mistakes?
Yeah, I don't know. If it was if it was me and I was Spike, I would do that. But TNA itself, they've never really spent money on advertising the TV show, yet they live and die by the ratings of the TV show.
Have you come up with some sort of explanation for the ECW rating yet, the 1-1?
Everyone's just saying it's the first week of the new season, and a lot of people are sampling other shows, and you know, I'm sure that's part of it.
Seems to be an awfully big drop for sampling other shows.
Yeah, I mean, and the fact is we've had first weeks of the season every single September in the history of wrestling, you know, whenever there's been primetime wrestling, and we've never had this kind of a drop. You know, we've had to drop against football, you know, but obviously there was no football on Tuesday, and football is like, you know, more head-to-head with wrestling fans. You know, I think, I'm surprised ECW number has stayed where it has for so long, because I just don't find the show, you know, it's such an obvious secondary show to WWE. They don't really have the star power. Like before, you would bring in, you know, every now and then, every couple of weeks, you would bring in a big star from the other brands, and they've been doing less and less and relying more and more on the ECW talent. And, you know, they had CM Punk and Matt Striker as a long main event, which I don't think helped, because Matt Striker's never been pushed as a serious, you know, main event level guy. So, you know, I mean, the Miz Balls Mahoney thing I've enjoyed every single week, and I still do, and it's like, but it's the only thing I think on that show that's really catching on, I guess.
Was there a freak out come? Oh, go ahead, Lance.
I think one thing too that could have, you know, hurt a little bit, the whole elimination chase match thing was really, I think, the hook that they were planning on getting people to tune in each week. But it's like the center installment of a trilogy, and that someone's going to be eliminated, but there's still the next match the following week. So there's really nothing worth, I have to watch this week. There's 15 other shows I can try this week. It was such an easy show to pass on.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, because you're right. Everyone knew that the match, you know, the real match is this coming Tuesday's match, because they knew, you know, So it's like, I was really, you know, it's interesting because WWE has done a lot of these tournament type things, but usually when they do it, it would be the 1 week thing where you would have the 3-way or the 4-way, and then the winner's in, and then that week you announce him as the contender, and then you do 3 weeks of building the match on TV, and instead they built the contender for 3 weeks and will not announce, you know, and I presume it's Burke, you know, won't announce Burke until, you know, probably the end of the show on Tuesday, and it's like, okay, then you got to do the confrontation with Punk, and then the pay-per-view's the following Sunday, just a few days later.
Is the word tournament banned?
Well, this isn't really a tournament. It's an elimination series of events. I don't know. I mean, they do tournaments all the time there, too.
Yeah, they did a tournament on SmackDown, and they wouldn't call it a tournament. It was like some chase for the title or something.
Yeah, well, they changed those names. You know, there's an aversion to certain words in that company, and it's quite peculiar.
Dave, Raw tomorrow, everybody comes back. What do you expect?
Well, I mean, I think that everybody would expect something with Umaga and Triple H. I think that's pretty obvious off of the Vince McMahon Triple H match. And aside from that, Kennedy back, I think they'll probably try to get him into the thick of things pretty quick. And Regal back as GM because they injured Coachman at the end of the show. So, you know, it's Coachman's kind of good at you know, kind of being the butt of jokes. But I kind of think Regal is. I don't know. I like Regal a lot more in the role. He's more entertaining to me.
I think Regal is great in that role, but I also love Coach and Vince together.
Yeah.
I think they're so awesome together. Such a great duo.
Yeah.
Now, the ECW rating, when it came out, was there a big freak out? Like, changes must be made at this point?
I didn't really hear anything like that because I don't think they really care that much about the ECW rating. I think it's very much, you know, I think they're really in tune to the Raw rating more than anything else. You know, even SmackDown when it goes up and down, no one seems to freak out that much.
Dave, a quick question for you via email. Chuck and Silva in December. Do you think that since he's had time to think about it, Dana is just going to do that match?
They're talking about it a lot more than they were, you know, 5 days ago even. It's not, you know, it's Dana's decision. I don't see a better match on the horizon, so I think that I think it's better than 50% that it's going to happen, but I have not heard him making the decision.
What were your thoughts on Strikeforce last night? I didn't get to see it.
I didn't really see it either. I tried to watch it on the internet, but it kept freezing up, so I just heard, you know, I talked to some people there. They said it was a lot of fights, not really any great fights. It's more the atmosphere of the idea that they'd had a show at the Playboy Mansion with the women and the celebrities and $1,000 ticket prices, and it was, you know, it was an event, you know, as far as matches go. I mean, nothing extraordinary, I don't think.
And this person here wants to know what has happened with Ric Flair. Is he coming back? Any update?
No real updates. You know, it's not, you know, the public perception that, you know, everything's cool and all that, that's not the case. It's still not the case. You know, what's going to happen is up to the sides mending, you know, not really mending fences, but just getting on the same page. And, you know, I don't know. There's that final run is definitely a great storyline that they could do for Mania, and the Mania doesn't have very many obvious great storylines. So, business-wise, I see it as the right thing for the company, and obviously that also would be the right thing for Flair. So it makes sense to me that they would mend fences, but they haven't done it yet.
How's Ric Flair finance doing? Because
it's just starting.
It's such a strange idea for a business for Ric Flair. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and it's so that website is so kind of corny and everything. It's like you know, I have a lot of admiration for Ric Flair as a wrestler, but you know, his track record financially doesn't exactly give you mountains of confidence.
It's kind of a fascinating business idea, though, of I failed financially, I'll teach you how not to.
Yeah, because I've learned all the lessons, which sure. I don't know that if he had only failed like JBL had failed financially once and then came back and did really, really well, that would be pretty good, but to have, you know, failed and made money for 30 years and still, you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's not like he's had that turnaround.
Lance, you've got a new group of students in, and some have left.
Yes, they're diminishing in a hurry. I've had 3 people quit in the first 3 weeks and had 3 no-shows the first day. So we're down to, I think, 7 guys and 1 girl from my original 15 confirmed.
So down to 8. Wow.
Yes.
Now, I've heard a lot of things. I've never been to your school, but I've heard a lot of things from a lot of different people, including Don Callis, who called it the cleanest wrestling school he'd ever seen. Clinical, I believe, was his exact words. And you don't seem like the kind of guy that would beat on his students. So were these people just not cut out for this business?
I guess so. The one guy only made 2 classes, and he had claimed to be had been previously trained and had some degree of experience already, and he made 2 classes and never showed up again. The other guy was having neck problems. I guess he had had a bad neck in the past and realized that as fake as it may be, it's not fake enough. And then this last one was a bit out of the blue. He said, I just don't like it. And I'm like, oh, okay.
Do you have a lot of people that come unprepared in the sense of they don't seem to have any idea what they're getting into?
That seems to be, unfortunately, more the case than not. It's amazing how people think that they can just walk in and, I guess because it's fake, it's easy, and despite never having run, jumped, or played as a kid, are going to be a professional athlete.
But, I mean, you've had some students that have done very well for themselves.
Yeah, there's quite a few that are starting to do quite well. But, yeah, it's, you usually get a couple or three with a ton of potential, or that, at least an aptitude to push hard, and then there's less. But I think the 7 or 8 that are remaining now are the ones that are going to benefit, because they're going to get additional ring time and get more attention from me because the numbers have shrunk. So it's a good case scenario for them, at least.
Could there ever be a student who just impressed you so much, like if I went and trained with you, for example, that you would say, you know what, I'm going to give you the Lance Storm Jr. name?
I don't know if I'd want to saddle anyone with that. Actually, ironically enough, there was a guy that they jokingly, actually it was the year that Justin Credible went through. There was Justin and a guy by the name of Brett Farrell that were the only two that had any potential at all. And the one guy, Brett, was actually from North Bay that got a bit of a Lance Jr. moniker just locally amongst the guys, just sort of as a rib. He never worked as it, but it was a bit of an ongoing rib. And there was another guy that we had dubbed Jericho Jr. once just because he had the same hair and was a huge Shawn Michaels mark also.
Now, there is a viral campaign going on in WWE, I guess is the best way to term it, SaveUs.222. It appears to be a forerunner to the debut of Chris Jericho. We don't know for sure. It was an idea that Court Bauer on the creative team came up with this summer, and the idea was it would introduce either Jericho or the new Hart Foundation. And there were a number of different ideas, and the entire writing crew loved the idea. And unfortunately, the whole Chris Benoit situation occurred, and everything sort of got thrown into disarray. And now here it is several months later, and there was a strange short video on Raw. The video plays if you go to WWE.com, and I believe go to the No Mercy page, and somewhere on the page, if you click on it, it will take you to the video, and it seems to be beginning. And Chris Jericho is going to return to WWE soon, whether it's part of this angle or not. I know that the new Hart Foundation is also being brought up on the road, so they could possibly be the individuals that will be debuting as a result of this. But we have an email question for you, Lance. Are you surprised that Jericho has chosen WWE over TNA, and do you think it is possibly a bad decision?
I'm certainly not surprised, although I don't know if it's official. I've actually avoided asking him just because I don't want to be in a position where I could tip things off, so I don't know if WWE's actually announced it or not. If he has officially signed for a return, I'm not surprised. From day one, I knew in my heart he would not go to TNA. He's too smart of a businessman, in my opinion, and TNA's track record is one of taking people with star power and making them another, somewhat less drawing star in the middle of the pack like everybody else. I couldn't see him going that route. He seemed to be, WWE to the end for me. Just that, this is the big stage. I'm in this to be on the big stage. So I certainly would expect him to return to WWE.
It is rather interesting that he would likely debut on Raw, which is the brand where Hunter, to use a term my buddy Vinny used, is carpet bombing the brand, destroying men week after week, multiple men. And Jericho is taking his chances there, as opposed to going to TNA, which is about to get 2 hours, and where he would undoubtedly be made the world champion very, very quickly. I just think it's very interesting that he chose to risk WWE as opposed to going where he would automatically get a huge push. It sort of says something about his ideas of TNA lately.
Well, do we know for sure he's going to Raw?
We don't know for sure, but I'm pretty sure.
I would imagine the debut would be. There's no point in debuting somebody with a big comeback on a taped show.
ECW.
I think regardless of he's going to get the title when everyone gets the title when they first go to TNA. You know what I mean? Christian did, Rhino did, all these guys did, and all of them are Angle did, and he's the latest that still has it. But it's and then everybody's just down into that middle card sludge that nobody means anything more than anybody else inside of 6 months or a year. So Jericho has experience in WWE, and he's been there with the political structure, and he knows everybody there. I think he's confident that he can survive, and even being second fiddle in WWE, I still consider a far bigger step up than the number one fiddle in TNA.
Let's go to Alan in Florida. Alan, what's going on?
Bryan, I wanted to ask you about the wellness policy. Is it like a double standard? Because Batista and Orton are still there. I mean, they haven't been touched.
I think if you watch the television, it's pretty clear there is a double standard. I'm not sure exactly how it works. I think that if you really look at everything that's gone down, it's pretty clear that WWE has not changed the loophole in the policy that allows guys to get testosterone replacement therapy or steroids for purposes of injury rehabilitation. Vince has gone in front of the locker room twice now. He went once shortly after Benoit died, and he went once about 3 weeks ago, and he said, everybody get off drugs. And you can tell from watching TV that a lot of the undercard guys heard this message and got off drugs.
Right.
You can also tell from looking at TV that some people did not apparently heed that warning. And I really have felt in the last couple of weeks that what has happened is they have given their wellness information to Congress. They have done everything that Congress has asked for the most part. And they feel that everything's over now. September's over. There have not been any hearings. There are not going to be any hearings. We're fine. And to me, that message was sent on Monday when certain guys were just gigantic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I hate the double standard quote, though, because there's still human growth hormone out there that, regardless of what test Vince wants to throw at him, you can pass a test. So just because there's bigger guys on the show still that are getting pushed doesn't necessarily mean that they're looking the other way and these guys are failing wellness tests.
That's true.
If you're just a mid-card guy that's got a minor occasional, steroid habit, you spend a few bucks on a cyclodeca or something, go, oh, crap, I got to get off the gas. But if you're somebody that's, a big-time, long-term bodybuilder on human growth hormone and everything else, a major part of your life, you're going to go more out of your way to either use growth hormone to pass your test or get the prescriptions you need to stay on it because it's such a big part of your life. It doesn't necessarily mean there's a double standard.
Well, you know what's interesting about that is with HGH, guys like Funaki and Umaga, they were busted because it was discovered that they had been purchasing it. They did not fail any tests. None of these 11 people that were suspended actually failed a test. And to me, that's the key because when you see what they were taking, they all should have failed tests, except for the pure HGH guys. Everybody else should have failed their tests, and they did not fail their tests, which really tells me something. Alan, anything else?
Yeah. About Hogan and Austin, is that just like a personality conflict, or are they trying to just stall the match to build it up later, or what's going on with that?
That match will never happen. And Lance, I'm sure, knows as well as anybody, you never say never in this business, but it's an issue of Austin loves holding this match over Hogan's head, and it drives Hogan crazy. He wants to beat Austin. He's never going to. Austin loves it. Austin can't even get back in the ring. And so you're never going to see it. So
they don't like each other, or what is it?
No, they do not like. I'm sure Hogan will work with him, but Austin has no desire to. So we have some questions for Lance, and I wanted to ask you also about the last caller. Your thoughts on the Steve Austin Hulk Hogan match and why it's not taking place?
I think the biggest thing, and this comes back to a bit of an old adage in wrestling. With it being a work, it's one of those things where I'm getting back on one of those things. Not want to do a job for a guy that you know won't put you over if the instance was reversed. And I think that's what it comes down to. It's like I don't think Austin is willing to put Hogan over because he knows Hogan wouldn't return the favor. So it's sort of the last calling card of who's going to put who over to make that person out to be the be-all and end-all biggest star in the history of the business. And when both guys know the other isn't going to put them over, you butt heads. It was something actually stuck in the back of my craw in ECW that I worked with Rob so many times, and he never put me over. And it was always in the back of my mind. It's like, would he if he was asked to? And there was only one house show in WWE. It was in Vancouver where we had a single match, and I was to go over. And Rob didn't even blink, went out and did the exact same hard-working match we always had. And from that point on, it was a little bit more comfortable in the back of my mind going, you know what, I put this guy over 1 million times, but it was his turn, he did it. And I think Steve knows that if it was Hogan's turn, he wouldn't do it.
It's a funny thing with the top guys, like a Hulk Hogan, like a Steve Austin, where they may say publicly that wins and losses don't matter, but they obviously very strongly feel that they do. Whereas I think a lot of wrestlers really don't, I don't know if don't care is the right word, but they don't see it as a career-ending deal if they lose to Lance Storm or Rob Van Dam.
Yeah, I think part of the problem is that there's a lot of insecurity in this business and there's a lot of ego. And in basketball, you've got stats and world championship rings that can say, look, I am the best. But in wrestling, you don't have that because of the nature of the business. So I think guys are always looking for, you know, that defining moment, that claim to fame that, you know, I was the biggest star there was. And there's a few guys in the business that legitimately have claim to being perhaps that. And that's where it starts getting sticky. Because, you know, who was the biggest draw ever? Was it Hogan or was it Austin? So there's no way of ever really proving for sure who the better man was. So I think things get a little stickier.
It is funny that one of the biggest stars of all time, Rock, totally did not care. I mean, I think maybe Shawn Michaels, because they had an incident or two back in the day. But, I mean, other than that, he did more jobs probably than any guy in his position in the history of this business.
Yeah, and Ric Flair loves doing jobs.
Ric Flair, there's another one, yeah.
Although I think if you read his book, I think the pot shots at Foley and Brett were his insecurities coming out.
Yeah.
Trying to make sure that, you know, okay, these guys are good, but they're not in my league. Everybody be sure to note this. I think that's where that came from, was his insecurities.
What are your thoughts on Jericho's book? We have a question here about it.
I'm one of the lucky ones that have already read it. And it'll be slightly different because I got such an early version. It's just on computer printout paper from his editor. But it's going to be as close, if not actually accomplishing, dethroning Have a Nice Day as the best wrestling bio. It is, I think, a better story, and he did more of a worldly journey than Mick. And I think he is equally as entertaining. I'll be curious if people who don't know all the people he's referring to will find it as funny as I did, because the description of people that I crossed paths with early in my career, I found myself bursting out laughing hysterically reading, and I'm curious if others that don't know the people he's describing will find it as funny. But the book is an absolute awesome must-read, and it will be our next Bookmarks Book Club book on my website. So pick it up, read it, and get involved.
In the bookmarks at stormwrestling.com. The Jericho book, I mean, so it sounds like a fun book. Do you think there's going to be criticism that he could have been, that maybe he didn't attack targets that people would expect him to attack?
No, I don't think so. Because I think when you write a book, you have to decide what you're going to do. And he tells an amazing journey, all through the Indies and overseas in Mexico and Europe and Japan. And I think the direction he covers completely. You know, I don't think he sugarcoats anything, but he's not trying to turn it into the National Enquirer either. I read it and thought it was really accurate, really honest, in that, it's not, oh, I'm so great, oh, look how much money I drew, I should have been the biggest star in the history of the world. Please remember me as great. It was really honest, it was really humble, and so damn funny and entertaining.
I want to go to Alex in San Diego. He has a question about the Fan Fest at the Cow Palace, I believe. Alex, you there?
Hey, Brian. Hey, congratulations on getting the show, and hello, Lance. Basically, I just threw down $250 to go to this Wrestle Fan Fest in San Francisco, and I've made comments about it before. Is this thing really going down, or what?
You know, it's funny you should ask that, because I emailed somebody a couple of days ago that is supposed to be in a very prominent position at the Fan Fest, and asked him if it was still ongoing, and I have not heard back. And I heard, you know, I think a lot of people have probably heard that you know, there are things ongoing that are sort of questionable about this event. I presume it's going on, but I've talked to people that don't seem to know anything more about it than they knew about 4 months ago, and it seems to be looming. So I don't have an answer for you.
Okay, wow. All right, thank you. And then that's it. Just congratulations on getting the show, and have a good day.
All right, thanks, and good luck in training.
All right, thank you, Brent.
Lance, the fan fests. Have you? You're not a big guy for the fan fests.
I'm not, no.
Meaning, it doesn't seem to be your thing. Not that you're not in demand. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I've had people ask me if I, okay, you're not taking bookings. What about autograph signings, fan fests, and stuff? The problem for me is I got off the road to get the hell off the road. It's not that I don't want to meet fans. It's not that I don't want to be a part of the business. I don't want any part of being on the road. I want to be home with my family. So I have no interest in going out and signing autographs any more than I do going out and working. I love working. I love signing autographs, but I don't want to go anywhere to do it.
So perhaps if they brought the fan fest to you.
Yes, if somebody wants to organize a huge fan fest here in Calgary, they could probably get me booked without too much effort.
Let's go to Greg in Iowa, who has a question about Paul Heyman. Greg, are you there?
Hi guys. I have two questions. One's for Lance, but first I'll ask you, obviously I've been hearing all over that Paul Heyman's doing movie scripts, but wouldn't TNA be in a position to want to sign him? I mean,
I would guess it's more a situation of Paul Heyman not wanting to sign with TNA. I think at this point he wants to try his hand at Hollywood. And, I think that if he were interested in wrestling, he probably would have worked something out with WWE. And I get the impression that they knew that he was not interested in wrestling just because his contract just kind of expired and it wasn't a major deal. So I would not expect him. And when you really think about it, too, if you look at the writing crew for TNA and they've got Jim Cornette right there and do absolutely nothing with him, I don't even have confidence that they would think about potentially using Paul Heyman. I'm sure it's been discussed, but clearly not at a major level.
The problem is, too, that, I think TNA creative management, Jarrett, whoever you want to dump it on, is in denial. You know what I mean? They don't want to hear the truth. And that's one thing that Paul Heyman has always gotten himself in more trouble with for anything else, is he spits out the truth and what he thinks no matter who he's talking to. And I don't think a lot of people in TNA want to hear what the problems are because they're trying to cover up those problems to ensure their own spots.
Okay. And for Lance, I've been hearing that for in the WWE they're going to be testing for marijuana and finding the people that don't pass the test $1,000. Do you think the guys are just going to keep on smoking? And also, Lance, what are your thoughts about marijuana in the industry?
I think the one thing that's going to be interesting, because a lot of people are saying, well, if you only get tested 4 times a year, the worst you can do is get, hit with a $4,000 pot tax. But since November 1st, they're supposed to be releasing negative tests, and I'm curious what it's going to do for talent PR and public image of the company if every 3 months we get announced that here's a half a dozen people or a dozen people that are failing their pot test every 3 months.
I actually do not think they're going to release marijuana failures because they've already made it clear that if you fail a test for pot, it's not going to count as a strike. It's not going to count as a suspension or anything like that. So I would guess that those will not come out.
That'll just be another double standard so they can hide drug use in the company?
Sure.
Lance, what are your thoughts on pot in the industry?
I'm against pot as much as I am any other drug. I'm as drug-free as you're going to get. But that being said, I don't think, it really is an effective factor in the wrestling industry. It certainly doesn't help your career any. So, it wouldn't have broken my heart when they first didn't include pot in the wellness program. It didn't bother me at all. But, I certainly have no problem with them testing for whatever the hell they want.
I would very much guess that the $1,000 fine 4 times a year is probably not going to bother a lot of people. But that would be my guess. I mean, we don't really know for sure if they're going to test more than 4 times, but my assumption is it'll be just the 4 times per year, and everybody will just be upset with being out $4,000. But, I mean, for the big names, not a big deal at all. For the lower-level names, probably a little bit, but not too bad. So, got an email question for for Lance. It's about Edge. He mentioned in his newest blog that he stayed for a while with you during an ongoing cross-country trip. I want to know if they discussed any of the more newsworthy items of the last few months involving Edge, such as When he'll come back? Anything of that nature?
Well, I talked to him about it. I don't want to tip my hand. I think he's still got about a month left for medical clearance on his torn pec. The rehab had gone extremely well. He was able to start lifting again, so he was feeling quite good health-wise. But it was more a social visit than a business visit. We tended to talk more about life in general than the wrestling business. But he's doing well, and I would expect to see him back in approximately a month.
Now, he'd had the torn pec, if I recall correctly, in like late 2006, and I guess he just rehabbed it, and then he eventually tore it off the bone. Is that basically what happened?
The other one.
What was that?
The other pec.
Oh, is the other pec?
He originally had the tear on the one side, rehabbed it, and then he tore the other pec. Was he spearing some guy in a stupid outfit, some kind of skit thing on the floor?
Oh, that's right. Yeah, it was the yeah, I remember that. I can't remember
somebody
who
in a costume.
Booker or somebody.
Yeah,
but,
something like
so he tore the other pec.
It's the other one, yeah.
Well, that sucks.
Yes, completely.
Huh. I was unaware of that aspect of it. We've actually got a caller that wants to talk about Edge. Nick in Kansas City. Nick, what's going on? Hell of a question, Nick.
Yes,
let's go to Joe in New York City, who has a question about Chris Jericho. Nick,
hey,
or Joe, I'm sorry. Joe, are you there?
Yeah.
What's up?
My question's for Lance. You were talking about the Chris Jericho book before. How up-to-date is his discussion, if any, on Chris Benoit, on his book?
The book was written before Benoit died. It was already in the final drafts getting printed by then, so it doesn't cover Benoit at all. I wouldn't be surprised if he goes back and adds a brief mention either as before or an after in the book. But the book was written before he died, so.
Would you expect that he might go back and maybe change some things that he had written about Benoit, or do you think that let's just say that you wrote a book and perhaps you heavily praised Chris Benoit, and then you learned before going to press that he had killed his family and committed suicide. How would you feel immediately afterwards? I mean, would it be your first inclination to go back and change some of the good things that you had said, or could you separate it even from the beginning of this was this guy's career, this is what this guy did at the end?
I think I would go back and reread just to make sure, but I don't recall, and again I read it a little while ago, I don't recall there being anything in-depth about Chris. I don't think he probably had to go back and edit anything. I know he had mentioned that there was a page in the book that he was going to list or mention those who have passed during his career, people that he had worked with or that were mentioned in the book that were no longer with us. I would imagine he would have had to go back, add Benoit to that list, and probably some degree of a footnote, but I don't think the book needed to be rewritten or altered any.
Okay, and my next question is, I was thinking about the whole Jericho video that was on all three shows last week, and if he really is returning, I was thinking to myself, yes, originally this is going to get everyone excited, but when you really think about it, what matchups are there that are new for Jericho and would really get people to buy the pay-per-views after he first debuts?
I don't even know if it's a matter of needing new opponents or anything like that. I think that I used to watch CMLL all the time, and if you look at some of the guys, not so much nowadays, but a few years ago, you would see guys that were working in CMLL in the semi-main events that were working in 1980. 1980. I was 5 years old. And the whole point of it is they understood how to cycle from the top of the card, cycle guys down to the middle, cycle guys down to more to the beginning, and then rotate them back up again. It was just a matter of change. It wasn't so much needing brand new feuds or anything like that. I'm sure there's some new feuds for Jericho if he comes back, a guy like Lashley or something like that. But I think that there's just been so much of the same thing on all the shows lately that fans would just want something new.
And I think also, too, I think the one thing that is lacking in WWE to a certain extent are guys with legitimate world-renowned seasoning. There's only a handful of guys that have really, been to the big dance and really put out as a big top-level guy. And I think Jericho is going to bring, back that main event type player, that entertainment, showmanship, showbiz aspect that I think a lot of the developmental guys that brought up, just don't have the years in yet to be that big of a showman. I think regardless if he's working this, even if he went back to working the exact same program he left 2 years ago, it's still going to be fresher and more big-time show business than what you get now.
Joe, thanks very much for the call. Lance, we had a question here about training. You mentioned you had a girl, and somebody wants to know, how is it training a female? Any major differences as far as how you have to go about it?
Not major. There's a few minor, but I worked with, Jillian Hall and Mickey James and Melina, Beth Phoenix, Michelle McCool a little bit in OVW, and I worked a lot with, Trish and Victoria when I was on the active roster. So I've worked with the girls before, so it's not a huge adaptation for me. There's a few things they do differently and a few things they don't have to learn, but for the most part, you're still in the same industry, so it's for the most part the same.
This person also wants to know, how do you feel about individuals that want to get trained just to have fun? Maybe guys that don't necessarily want to make a living or even have a number of matches, but just they love wrestling, they want to pay to get trained, they just want to see if they can do it and have some fun.
I don't have a problem with it. I think people, before my generation might, just because they're still stuck in the kayfabe era, but as long as the person is willing to show up and give it their all and not disrespect the business, I have no problem with someone that wants to do it at a weekend warrior level.
Let's go to Tim in Virginia, who has a question about New Jack. Tim, what's up?
Hey, Brian and Lance, thanks for having me on the show tonight. It's been a really good show so far.
Thanks.
I was one of the very dumb few to enroll in New Jack's wrestling school in Richmond, Virginia. And after seeing what kind of a jerk he was in real life, I just wanted to know if Lance had what Lance's his view on New Jack was working with him in ECW.
This is the last person I think I would go on a national radio show and say that about, but Lance, your thoughts?
Yeah, just don't give out your home address. I never really worked with New Jack in ECW. We're obviously in the company together, but we were two completely different entities, and I really sort of kept it that way. I worked with New Jack in Smoky Mountain Wrestling way back when, before he was the, hardcore, crazy, cutting people up with X-Acto knives stuff, when he actually still had to wrestle and could. But yeah, New Jack is a wild and crazy guy, to say the least. And I would imagine if you paid too much attention to his career the last few years, you'd know what you were getting into when you signed up for the New Jack School of Wrestling.
I did. I kind of walked into it just like, well, this will be an experience for a couple weeks until he runs out on us, which he ultimately did. But it was interesting. It hurt, but yeah, he beat the crap out of us pretty much for the 2 weeks. So.
You didn't learn any holds or anything of that nature?
We learned no, unless a being thrown into a wall is called a move. No.
Kind of a hold.
Yeah, kind of. I guess in a way.
It had to have been entertaining, if nothing else.
So, are you going to keep training, or did the New Jack deal sort of turn you off to the business?
It turned me off of being thrown into stuff. So now I'm kind of weighing my options. There's really not any good wrestling schools that I've been able to find around here. So I'm just kind of trying to weigh my options right now.
How far is Calgary from Virginia?
Oh, it's really far, especially in a 97 Chevy Cavalier, that's for sure.
I see. Well, if anything comes up, please call back and let us know, because that was a hell of a story right there with New Jack. Training in New Jack School.
Will do. Thank you very much, guys.
Yeah, thanks for calling. You can call in, everybody, by the way, at 1-800-878-PLAY. You can send emails to Bryan at WrestlingObserver.com. Lance, you've been watching a lot of mixed martial arts lately.
Yes, I've been getting into it more and more. I've actually gone to the step of actually programming my DVR to record the Ultimate Fighter every week. And I've been catching the free pay-per-views as well as the Ultimate Fight Nights. And I've actually gone as far to contact my cable company and figure out how I can get pay-per-view, because I may even start spending money and ordering some MMA pay-per-views.
Wow. That's a big step.
Yes, it is.
This step was not made for wrestling.
Pardon?
The step was not made for wrestling, clearly.
It's harder for me with wrestling just because I've been in the industry and something just feels wrong having to pay for it.
Sure.
You know, it just seems wrong. I don't know why, but having to dish out money to watch a pay-per-view for a company I've worked for and a show I've been on just seems wrong to me. So I have a harder time justifying spending cash to order a wrestling show.
Now, if your son or daughter decided, you know, I want to get into this business, whether that be pro wrestling or MMA, what would you say?
I wouldn't stop them if they had their heart set on it, but I would have a very long, serious talk to make sure that they were mentally strong, because this industry, you know, especially the pro wrestling one, has really eaten up and spat out a lot of people. But there are a few of them people. I think myself is, you know, a prime example of people that can use the business and not get ruined by it and have a great time with it. So if they were prepared enough and a strong enough willed person, I would certainly keep my eyes on them very closely to make sure that they didn't get eaten up by the business. But I wouldn't be, you know, forbidding them from doing it.
Are you planning on taking the kids to the game plan?
I am, actually. I've always enjoyed Rock's movies, and I enjoy Disney movies generally, too. So this is a chance where I can take my kids, I can kill two birds with one stone. And I'm looking forward to it. I get annoyed at the critics that are, you know, lambasting, saying, well, you know, it'll appeal to kids but not adults. It's like, it's a Disney movie. It's aimed at kids.
The acting bug never got to you?
There was never an opportunity, and I don't necessarily think I'd be necessarily particularly good at it. So it's not something I went out of my way to pursue. You know, I think fame is one of the driving factors behind getting into movies, and I've never had a whole lot of interest in that.
We've got Geraldo in San Diego who wants to talk about the new Heart Foundation. Geraldo, what's up?
Hey, Brian. Hey, Lance. Sorry, I have a sore throat. I was wondering about the new Heart Foundation. Who is it going to consist of? Because I thought Bret Hart was not going to have nothing to do with the WWE anymore.
The last I heard, it would be Teddy Hart, Harry Smith, and Natty Neidhart. And I know they want Bret Hart there to do an angle to introduce them. I don't know if he's going to do it. I don't know if, Lance, you've heard anything?
I haven't heard from Bret, but I have heard rumors that he's willing to help out as much as he can within reason to kick them off, which I think would be fabulous. I'm a huge fan of Natty Neidhart. Harry I don't know as well, but he's really talented. And Teddy, who everything reports I've heard has got his behavior in check, is an extremely talented guy too, so it could be a really dynamic combo.
Geraldo, thank you very much for the call. I want to very quickly go to Lee from Canada. Lee, what's up? Lee, are you there?
Yes. Hello?
Yep, what's up?
Yes, I just wanted to ask Lance about his time in WCW in the Team Canada. I was always a fan of that stable.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. It didn't last as long as a lot of people thought. It was only about I think, an 8-month run at most. But it was a lot of fun. We had a lot of good people and did a lot of fun stuff. And it was nice that they left us out of the Kevin Nash, Scott Steiner top end of the cards. We were left alone a fair bit and got to do what we wanted, which was great.
Yes,
thanks very much. Oh.
That's awesome. Oh, I was just wondering, did you get along good with Vince Russo in WCW? I thought he booked you very well.
I don't think it was Russo that was booking me, but yeah, I did quite well then.
Thanks, everybody, for listening this week. Make sure you check out Lance's website at stormwrestling.com, WrestlingObserver.com, the host site for this website, or this radio show, and, of course, Figure4Online.com, our website. We shall talk to everybody next week.